Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. Another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Dynamoto, and today we're going to be talking about theming at Proto. But before we get into that, a couple of, updates. I guess the first thing is that there's no guest today. We've been really on a roll with guests here, and I really appreciate all the guests that have been coming on by to share things that they're excited about or thoughts that they've had or all that kind of good stuff. We will have a guest tomorrow, a fairly special one, in fact, because it's a topic that I don't know a lot about, but it is about systems. It's just a different kind of systems. So if you're interested in that, absolutely show up in 24 hours, right where you're watching right now, to hear more about whatever that is. The last Wireframe episode is actually a little while ago. It was not last Friday, but the Friday before that. We had Dan Abramoff on, who you might know from the React ecosystem, but he was on to actually talk about this new protocol, the AT protocol. And if you're unfamiliar with that, that's the protocol in which Blue Sky is effectively built on top of. So if you're a Blue Sky user, that's kind of what you're using underneath the hood. And in that conversation, I got really inspired because what he was telling me, and you could watch the show in full if you'd like, but the gist of it is that this new protocol is really a way of sharing data, very similar to the way that you might share RSS, right? So on a blog or any particular publication site, you would have data in the form of these articles that you write, and that data can be shown in different places, like in different RSS readers and things like that. Same kind of thing with podcasts like this one. There's an RSS feed for this podcast if you're listening to it as audio, and you could subscribe to it, and then it would show up in these different podcast players, right? So you have your Spotify, your Apple Music, all those places. So there's a standard underneath RSS that basically says what these applications can expect as data. So as far as I understand, this AT protocol or Atproto is effectively trying to do the same thing, but make it a little bit more decentralized and make it more shareable and social. So my brain, with all the work that I've been doing with things like, MISON mode here, I was just thinking about, a theme is data. It's the data that I've been working with for several years now. Could this be a shareable kind of thing to bring into the ecosystem? And the answer is probably. So what we're going to talk about today is something I worked on all week last week, and there's a couple of different things that I want to talk about this project that I worked on, but just to cut to the chase, what I've effectively done is I've taken my research and development into MISON mode and turned it into a standard that could work in the AT protocol. Okay, and in order to talk a little bit about that more, I'm going to go ahead and show you a blog post that I wrote earlier this week. Here it is here. Let's bring that up on the computer. Okay, so this is on my blog. It's blog.diamato.design, and it's basically a post talking about this new direction that I'm introducing for the Atproto or Atproto community. Okay, and it goes into a whole bunch of stuff here about, again, what I kind of mentioned about talking with Dan the other week. But yeah, there's a couple of things that I've introduced in here that are effectively new to what I talk about in MISON mode, because in MISON mode, what I really focus on is the naming convention for those tokens, and then the concept of being able to nest expressions inside of each other. So those are the large topics within that approach. What I've needed to kind of dive into, which is what took me all week last week to kind of get to the bottom of, was the current state of affairs when it comes to theming in Blue Sky and in my mind as well from what I've seen in theming elsewhere. Because if it was just a matter of an app owns their theme and a user expects their expression, that's admittedly fairly easy to reason about, because then it's just a matter of the app deciding how much the user is able to affect their experience, right? Maybe you want the user to have the experience completely affected by whatever changes they want, or maybe they want that only for a little bit, only a little bit of influence. Now, the part that I wasn't necessarily entirely familiar with, I shouldn't say familiar, I'll say confident in, is this idea of the possibility of a author expression. Now, what that means is that if you're on Blue Sky, you may have been seeing a couple of different, and actually, let me see if I could, am I logged in here? I have to look. B Sky. No, I'm not logged in. Okay. If I was logged in, I would show you, but I'm not. Oh, that's going ahead of myself. On Blue Sky, for some publications, they're called publications, they are adopting this thing called standard site. You could actually visit it at standard.site. And when you adopt this part of the AT protocol kind of ecosystem, what this allows you is that Blue Sky kind of has adopted this, and now it will show your publication more special than other things that are shared on Blue Sky, in which case you'll actually have like small amounts of theming that like show through. So in this particular thing, I wish I could show you, I would have imagine me preparing for the show. On Blue Sky, you'll have like this view publication button, and that button can be styled in the way of the author of the publication. So it has not much to do with the way that Blue Sky wants to present it. It has much more to do with the way that the author of the publication wants to present its publication outside, right? Now that's really interesting, because now people can kind of express their work on other platforms and have those platforms accept the way that they want to express themselves, okay? That's a little bit of a kind of wrench in the way that I was kind of outlining some of the ways that I would think about theming, because usually, again, it's a two-party kind of thing that I was thinking about, where you have the app, which is, the host of the brand, and you have the user, which is like the person who's looking to view this application. But yes, if you are an application that is basically taking content from the outside and aggregating into a single place, then yeah, those pieces of content outside also have their own kind of expressions they want to show off and to present. So that's why I had to introduce these kind of tiers, which is effectively the app, the author, and the viewer. And these are basically trying to explain the way that an expression may change the presentation of a particular experience. Okay, so the app again owns the application, so they have their own way of expressing stuff. So you can imagine, like, again, going to, like, I don't know, Google Shopping, which is an example I like to use here. When you go to Google Shopping, you see basically a thing that just looks like Google. That's it, just looks like Google. And you'll see some brands that pop up every once in a while from just logos, but otherwise the whole thing looks like Google. Now imagine, you have a light and dark mode. So it's possible that the viewer then influences the app, and therefore the Google Shopping either is in light or is in dark mode. So that has that influence on that side. But here's the third piece, which is those products on Google Shopping, maybe those individual cards could be like orange for Home Depot and red for Target, just so that you could see what brand you're working with before you go ahead and you start shopping, because there is an amount of trust behind these brands and the expression that they're providing. So that's effectively what I'm trying to support here in this standard through this idea of app, author, and viewer. So seeing if that might land, I think it'll work, and I'll show you a demo a little bit later, but that's one of the parts of this thing. Scope themes, that's Mison mode, basically, right to a T. This is more or less trying to introduce this to folks that aren't familiar with Mison mode, but effectively that's what this is. And this screenshot, we're going to actually see the demo in a minute, but this is just demoing some scope mode stuff in here. And then, yeah, small footprint and big impact. But you could read the blog post. It's the latest one on blog .decentralized.design. But I do link to this new page. So this new page is a subdomain of mode.place, and you may be familiar that mode.place is where my book, Mode, is currently available. But I'm basically trying to take a little bit of a page out of standard.site, which is effectively where the standards for publication are. I'm basically trying to kind of be on the same wavelength there. And it was kind of important to me and why I was working so hard about it last week to try to align with the expectations and standards of this budding community, so that it makes more sense to them than something that might be more unique, right? So I wanted to really try to align as much as possible. So I'm hoping that this, at least the domain, and then further the schema that we'll talk about in a little bit, is to the expectations of the community, and there gets a larger adoption. But yeah, you could visit standard.mode.place right now, and you will see a lot of Claude generated stuff. And I want to address this because I've gotten some feedback about, this Claudisms or stuff like that's on the site. And actually, while I do that, let me just come back to me for a second, because I want to be clear about the direction that I was taking with this. So I know there's a lot of stigma when it comes to AI generated stuff and the slop that comes out of it, because people are just like, creating stuff, and it's like, oh, looks good to me, and ships it, right? Well, in this particular case, for what I was doing, the things that you need to know about this is that, first off, Mise Mode, the approach that I am trying to promote here, was done before I was working with AI. Okay, so this was 4 years of my work into this book here that was not in any way, shape, or form informed by AI, other than me understanding that AI was going to be a very significant role in the future, and which is why I touch upon AI later in the book. But AI is not the thing that generated the content in this book whatsoever. In fact, one of the acknowledgments that I have in the front of the book is for an escape room that's here local to where I live, because I wrote most of the book in the lounge of that escape room. So I have witnesses of people seeing me, write this book by hand. So the approach is very much not generated by AI or anything like that. It was very much my research and development into Mise Mode. So I want you to know that the approach behind the standard that I'm making is very much a human-based approach, and also community-based approach from all the work that I've done in the community. All right, so putting that on one point. The reason why I used Claude for a lot of the work to do this last week is specifically because of the anxiety I had trying to integrate standard.site for my own blog. Because once I was looking at that documentation, I was immediately overwhelmed by what it was trying to ask of me. And even when I had Claude actually implement it, I still had a very little understanding of what was happening and what was going on. So I was very worried that me trying to share this new idea, this standard, into this community would immediately be wrong, and I, have to go back to the drawing board and, just learn a whole bunch of stuff that, was really like challenging, but would take a lot of time to just understand the essence of like the standard underneath it, especially when this is emerging, so it's always changing, and there's lots of different communities out there for the AT protocol, where some of the stuff that I'm doing could be, I don't know, like confused for something that is irrelevant for just learning what the standard needs. So I didn't want that to be confused at all. So I was using Claude as the expert, so to speak, in the AT protocol, so that I could align as closely as possible to that standard, such that once I put this out into the world, that people would basically be like, yeah, that looks about right. right? That was really important to me. Is that again the source code, right? Which is something that we kind of brush aside now with the vibe code stuff. But the source code, the what we'll call the lexicon here, and the way that that actually is constructed is aligned to the expectations of the community. That was a huge important part for me in this work. Okay, so what you will see in the documentation, and this is one of the parts of the feedback, is you will see a lot of the decisions that were made in the documentation. And apparently this is like a smell for some reason, because it looks like, oh, some of the earlier decisions are documented in the thing that, when you were like working with Claude. Well, that was by design. I deliberately told Claude, hey, make sure all of this design decisions that we went over are documented very clearly so that people understand where we're coming from. This isn't just something that, again, I vibe coded, just because I felt like, ooh, this would be fun. Like, no, this is something that I really want to, push forward and grow, because I've put so much effort into the actual approach itself. I think this is a great opportunity for this approach to be adopted into the AT protocol so that everyone can express themselves in their own way. I mean, this is, again, like going back to, I don't want to say necessarily MySpace, because that was maybe a little bit out of control, but there's some structure to this, because me as design systems, there is structure to this that I like to try to keep to, which again, a schema or a lexicon really is trying to suggest in the first place. So in the documentation, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff right now that kind of explain the reasons why a decision was made in one place or the other. And I personally really appreciate that, especially when we talk to other people in the space about design system documentation generally, where you want to know where these decisions come from, right? Why did you decide this? This was a little bit weird. Why did this happen? Why did this happen? So I personally think that capturing all those decisions is a good thing. But the feedback that I've heard a little bit is that there's too much up front of understanding these decisions that were being made. So what I'm going to do soon, I'm not going to know exactly when, but soon, I'm going to go through this documentation site and kind of try to go in the other direction a little bit, where up front we kind of get to like the quick start and like how do you get started kind of situation. And then if you want to go into why this decision was made, I'll put it as like footnotes or some other, kind of appendix or something like that, if you want to go into the nitty gritty of stuff. So I just need to do some content moderation in there to make it more appealing, I think. But ultimately, again, the approach and the thinking behind it is grounded in my own work, and the schema is the real thing that Claude was helping me on to make sure that it aligns to the expectations. And again, this wasn't just in one session with a couple of hours spit this out. This was all week last week. I'm talking like I would finish a 5-hour session, wait for the the next window, go into the 5-hour session, like have it do a little bit of work while I was asleep, wake up the next morning, cook it again. Like, this isn't just like a little session. We're talking all week last week, making sure that the expectations of Atproto were met within my expectations of the mise-en mode approach. Okay. So I want to just, again, reiterate, this isn't, um, this isn't, I don't think that this is slop, and I hope that I don't convey this as slop. I really don't. All I, again, was using Claude for here is really just looking for that expert that I didn't have in Atproto or Atproto, and trying to get some expertise in it so that I can get this in front of people who have an expertise, right? I didn't want to just have like a shell of a thing and start from nowhere, right? You got to start somewhere. So anyway, that's why, you'll see a little bit of the Claudisms, I guess people are saying in there. Anyway, let's go back to the site, and I'm going to show you some more of the stuff that's in here. So Again, this is pre V1. So pre V1 basically means that the lexicon, which is effectively the schema in which sites in the AT protocol are expecting, is not published yet. I'm basically going to wait the week to get any particular feedback from folks in the community about this direction, which I've gotten a couple of pieces of feedback already, which is great. But I'm just kind of wanted to make sure, because once this is locked in, you kind of can't change much until you make a V2. So I want to be fairly confident before I lock this in as V1. So that's why it's not necessarily published yet. But once it is, which I'm, all things considered, I'd like to just publish next week. Um, we're going to, kind of wait to see what happens. Okay. Now, the other thing that I want to show here is going to be some of the guides here. This originally was a quick start, but I actually wanted to really show like all the pieces together. So one of the things that you'll see here is like publishing a theme. Eventually, what I want to do is I want to turn this website into a theme publishing like interface. So you would end up coming over here, setting the values for your theme, and then basically saving it to your own profile, which is not something that I actually save. It's actually something that's on, the AT protocol. You would effectively save it on your server. As far as I understand, I might be missing that, but effectively, this is the code that would be running in the background. So effectively, your let's see here. This is yeah, you have the OAuth client, which is a new thing that I've been seeing pop up over there, which is really cool. The OAuth is really kind of like helpful because if you have a Blue Sky account or anything on the AT protocol, you can just log into something, which is really cool. But yeah, you make a theme, which is a collection of aspects, which is just aspects of color and topography, just the name of these categories of things. And then you don't reference stuff from outside. You actually copy stuff, which is a little bit, I guess, different from what we would normally do in design systems, because everything ends up being a reference all the way down through. And what I realized in the conversation that I was having with Claude is that it's very easily possible that there might be a broken reference in there. So instead of having, a design token reference something somewhere else, you effectively copy the entire theme to have it be represented again. So for example, if you had a light theme and a dark theme and you wanted one of those to be default, you would effectively copy over the dark theme and make that the default. And that's effectively how this works, right? Instead of just saying, oh, point to this thing, it's literally just a copy. And again, that was very deliberate in terms of going back and forth of understanding like the pros and cons of making it a reference versus a copy. And admittedly, the copy thing ends up being a lot safer from a data standpoint. So that's why I went with the copy direction in this particular case. Okay. And then there's some validation stuff that's in here. Claude was telling me that third parties aren't usually validated. So there's some validation kind of work that you could do to make sure that this thing is validated against the schema or the lexicon. I like saying schema because I understand what that is. Lexicon seems foreign to me, but that's effectively what it is as far as I understand. And then, yeah, the last part of this is saying basically like declaring participation in this thing. That's basically creating a profile under the mode.place standard. So there's not much in the profile right now. Claude was basically telling me that I should have one for now, even if there's not really a lot on it. So I did. I don't know what the ramifications of that are, because really the whole thing about this ecosystem is you making a theme. That's it. So profile, I'm just like, okay, I guess maybe that's helpful. I'm not sure how, honestly, right now. Okay, so that's that. Now the second thing is talking about rendering things in your app. So now you are a person who's looking to see if an individual out there has their own theme that they've published that they might want to have on their site. So the first thing that shows up in here is identifying, this particular person. So the person might, be an author or a viewer. In this particular case, I think we're looking at, this is just an OAuth thing. Oh, no, this is agents, promise, get. Okay, so this is what's happening here is they're basically getting all of the people that the authorship that's effectively happened here. Yeah. And then, yeah, there's finally, here's the viewer default await get theme viewer decentralized ID and their default theme. So they're basically getting that default theme, whatever the viewer is. And then they're saying, okay, I have it now. What do we do next? what we do next is you make it into CSS. So that's effectively what this code is doing, is effectively turning this into CSS. Um, if you are familiar with theming and CSS, you may just think, oh, I'm just going to put this on the :root selector. That is not the case necessarily. You will most likely put this on some sort of data mode selector, and there's I think you could see it in here. Let's see, it's probably down here. Yeah, here it is. So this is data mode selector in here. You can see that it happens twice. And the reason that that happens twice is that in this system, you also have the ability to grab a certain aspect of the theme. So that means that I can just say, I only want the color to show through for this particular person's theme. Meanwhile, I want my typography to be maintained. Okay, and we'll see an example of that in the demo in a little bit. So a app who is allowing themes to be influenced on in their experience can basically choose, I only want your color to show through, but you're not in your typography, or vice versa, right? And there'll be other aspects potentially in the future, but right now I'm just working with the color and typography. So these selectors, the data mode thing here, and then this one over here that has that slash aspect, that is basically saying, you know, this collection of stuff gets applied onto this mode. And then, yeah, all those things are collected for the selector and joined and put into a theme. Now, there is one more piece of this, which is well, actually, there's a couple more pieces. The other thing is here is that I'm using CSS layers to show priority. So we were talking a little bit about the app, the author, and the viewer. That's the priority structure, effectively. Basically, if there's a viewer theme, it is more important than an author theme, which is more important than the app theme. So you set that priority up front, and then whatever comes in downstream through these different lifecycle events, because like the app could be server-side rendered CSS, the author also could be server-side rendered CSS, but it would be in a different place because you would be rendering posts. And then the viewer, that's probably client-side, unless you're doing server-side rendered authenticated login, which is totally possible. But generally speaking, you're probably doing a client-side login at that point. And then you would be pulling in the user's theme at that later part of the lifecycle to then potentially display it. So there's different life cycles in these things, and we just show priority through the layers up here. But yeah, then you mark the UI with data mode. You'll see that default is like the default kind of thing that basically is like looking for your default theme to apply it. And then, yeah, you have to also, there's a special key for fonts in there because you'll have custom fonts that you might be applying. So there's a way of rendering that stuff out. Then there's this thing about feeds and containment, which is, again, this whole idea of how an author shows in particular theme, how an author shows in a particular app while a user is logged in. So there's like lots of different little combinations that could happen there. So basically, in order to do the author stuff, you'll probably be using @scope. And @scope is a very new but available in all browsers feature in CSS that scopes CSS to a particular location. So in this particular case here, we'll see the actual HTML, which is important. So in here, for each individual post or card, there is a separate style block. Inside of that style block, it uses @scope, and that makes sure that the variables that you write inside of there don't leak out. So for this particular author on top here, this is Alice's default, okay, for that author. So Alice being an author for their article would be all this stuff over here. Meanwhile, down here, this is Bob's article, and you can have Bob's default over here, even though both Alice and Bob have a theme called default. So they're not conflicting with each other, even though they're the same kind of selector, so to speak. Because they're scoped using that @scope selector, they will not bleed into each other. They'll actually just stay within those articles based on what's set up over here, which is really cool. Okay, but I want to show you this actually in practice. So this is the demo. This is part of the site as well. And you could see a couple of, this UI that's over here on the right-hand side, which is kind of this all gray color, but there's a couple of little pieces out here that I can point to. So you can see Alice and Bob over here. And Alice, this is kind of trying to mimic the whole, again, standard site app implementation, where a particular publication might have a particular look. So you can see like the view publication thing that's over here. So this is Alice's, like, kind of theme, the way that they want to be presented as an author. Meanwhile, this is Bob and the way that Bob wants to be presented as an author, and you can see them being different. And then on the bottom here, this is actually a more specific concept, but this is Alice's zine. So instead of it being defined as a default for Alice, this is a more specific theme for Alice, and she's defined it, I think, at com.alice.zine. So that's her theme for her zine. And you'll see how this is important in a minute. But on the actual application, the application has this kind of default styling up here, but they also have this section which is meant to like convey Easter, and the app has defined that at com.demo.easter. Okay, and in particular, they're actually showing the color aspect of this only, so not the typography. And you can kind of see this happening already because the typography is just kind of falling through here, but the color is also different, right? And you could really see this. We're going to remove the Easter for a second, right? So now the Easter section just looks like the top section, but as soon as I could turn the Easter back on, there's a little thing behind my face that I'm clicking on and off. But as soon as I turn this back on, then I can have the Easter colors come back up here. Now, here's the really cool thing. Let's assume that a person logs in and wants to see their default theme on the site. So let's emulate a login by clicking this checkbox here. Now you can see the entire site, or I shouldn't say the entire, but the majority of the site has changed, right? So you can see that now this is this dark blue thing that's happening for most of the site. And we could even see that Alice and Bob have even changed into this dark blue situation for all their stuff, because what we're saying is that the viewer has a particular way that they want to expect this thing to be presented. But there's very specifically two things that actually haven't changed. And you could see that the first one here is this Easter section over here, right? So the Easter section hasn't changed because, again, it's a very specific thing. It's not the default. It is specifically looking for this com.demo.easter color to be shown. So because that has a definition, it is being shown because it is more specific than the default. And again, I can turn off the Easter here, and what will happen is we should get the blue again. There it is, right? So now everything's getting aligned. Now, we saw also at the bottom here that Alice's zine also hasn't changed. And again, that's because it's it's more specific than the default. So this is something that actually has been one of the larger parts of the discussion that I've had in the last couple of days about this thing. Because it's entirely possible that a person might want one way to express themselves publicly, right, versus another way where they are viewing or surfing the web in a different expression. So as an example here, you can imagine that maybe like Alice, for example, wants themselves to be presented in this kind of forest color when writing publications, right? So that's like the zine thing that we're seeing here. Meanwhile, she may instead want all of her applications to be this dark color. Right. So what that requires is it requires two themes, right? It requires the dark theme for the general, surfing the web, and then it will require this kind of like forest theme for when Alice is being shown in different like other apps, right? And the question, of course, ends up being is like, well, is it clear to people about the way that these things are presented across the board? And the answer is maybe not yet. And the way that I'm thinking about this and potentially going around it is saying that, maybe if Standard Site decides to adopt this kind of way of expressing, people and providing these looks, maybe they are going to look specifically for a theme called publication. And now you'll have a default theme that's specifically for when you are, going onto a site and looking for a particular, some content or whatever, going to Blue Sky. You can see Blue Sky the way that you want to see Blue Sky until you go to these individual posts, and these individual posts show the publication theme. And if you have a publication theme in the way that you want publications to be shown, then that means that it'll be shown that way. But if you don't, then you'll end up being shown the way that the publication wants to be shown, right? So that's the way that I see this working. The default thing that I have right now is just like the table stakes, right? It's just like um, you have one theme and it's the way that you want to be presented, it's the way that you want things to be presented to you. But if you want to be more granular, then you could become more granular. But you could be that in like, not all the way to the end of being very super specific, like with like, I don't know, UUIDs, but like say, hey, this is not just a generalized default theme. This is the publication theme, and this is the way the publications will be shown to you. If you want them to be, to be stylized differently, otherwise it'll be shown in the way that the publication wants to be shown. And I think that's a better way of just again giving people options a little bit and of expressing. So the last thing I wanted to show, by the way, is this ability of actually just saying color only, and how that works. You could see here. Oops. Let me go back to the spot over here. Is that now with the color only thing? Because before we had the topography coming through as well, right? So you can see the topography coming through here. But in this color only thing, now we see that the topography is the same the whole way through. It's just that this teal is now the defining factor for the user's theme, the viewer's theme. Okay, so that's another way of being able to like balance out how much the user has control over the experience versus how much the app still has control. You could say only color, only topography, so that might be helpful. So anyway, that's what I wanted to show for you today in terms of the this new thing that I've been working on, and yeah, there's a lot more to be working on in here, of course. I think it's still a little bit confusing about, again, who owns what at what point. So I think I need to make maybe some flow charts about that, or just get some more feedback about it. Because I had a really great discussion on the Discord for the AT community about default. And I've been shown a lot of other projects that are similar. Basically, I think a lot of the projects that I've seen are a separate application that's on the AT protocol, and inside of the application they have their own theming architecture that allows them to like make changes, but it doesn't like, it's not a standard that goes outside. I've also seen another project that kind of takes the design tokens community group standard and make that into something for the AT protocol, which I have my own reservations about, which I've talked about in that particular channel. But the long story short of that particular thing is that because the design tokens community group's naming convention is very fluid and open and admittedly could be unexpected, you can't really adopt that into individual sites because it won't know what to expect. You need a standardized naming convention so that you know the values that are coming in and where those are actually supposed to be applied. And that's effectively what a lot of Ms. on Mode is effectively defining what those features are and then having a very specific structured name to those things. So that's why I think the projects that I've seen, this one that I'm working on is different from those, because this is not meant to be an application as much as it's meant to be the standard in which other people hopefully would adopt to then get their own expressions shown to them, their own looks. Cool. So that's what I wanted to show you today. Again, read the blog post if you want a little bit more about that, or of course the site. Go to standard.mode.place to take a look at the docs. And like I said, I'll be updating them. Look out for the Lexicon. If you have any, I guess, expertise in Lexicon across the AT protocol, I do have code in a Tangled repo, and Tangled is effectively the new GitHub for the Atmosphere. So there's code over there that's looking for feedback. So if you have some feedback, that would be great. But otherwise, looking forward to any feedback. You have feedback, put them in the comments. Put in the comments on YouTube. I don't know. Maybe I'll find something that's into this stuff over there. All right. I haven't done this in a while, but I want to go ahead and do it today because it hasn't been a while. We haven't done the Wireframe Design Challenge in a while, so I want to go ahead and do that today. And let's bring up the lower third here, and I'll also do a refresh. And the Wireframe Design Challenge, you go to wireframe.ds.house/challenge. And on that webpage, it'll provide you a design prompt that you can think about how you might tackle that thing. So this first prompt that I've been given here today is make a tabletop game for a hot sauce brand in Haiti. Interesting. Okay. Well, I don't like hot sauce. It's too spicy for me. I like to say that I like everything as spicy as milk. So I don't know much about hot sauce. But tabletop game, interesting. I feel like Hot Ones has already done this. They must have already done some sort of game around the hot sauce, right? I mean, effectively, Hot Ones could be made into a game. I'm sure people are already playing that kind of thing where it's like a, I don't know, a truth or dare with hot sauce. I'm sure that's already happening. What would be unique though, right? I don't know anything about Haiti, by the way. I'd have to do extra research about Haiti, so I'm not going to even mention that in this particular prompt. I'm just going to go ahead and talk about tabletop game and hot sauce. So, a tabletop game for hot sauce. I mean, you have things like, I don't know, like Jenga, where like each brick would be like, I don't know, filled with some hot sauce. You had to taste it, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's something. Maybe the lesser hot stuff is at the bottom because that's going to be no. Is that right? I'm trying to think. The easier stuff would be on top. The harder stuff would be on the bottom, right? So you would want the less hot stuff on the bottom and the hotter stuff at the top. I think. I think. Yeah, maybe. Um, what else is there? Maybe there's like a memorization game where it's just like you gotta, memorize a pattern, and if you don't get it right, you gotta hit a hot sauce. Maybe I don't know. What else is out there? I'm just thinking of just like basic games. I'm not good with like the card games. I know like there's lots of people out there that are really into these strategy card game situations. My wife actually likes that a lot. Um, so I'm not really familiar with that. Maybe like is there like a maybe like a Cards Against Humanity thing or an Uno? How would Uno work with this? Uh, is it like draw four hot sauces? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not good with these games. I'm not good. I'm not good with the tabletop games. Um, I'm good with more good with like experiential games, for sure. Speaking of experiential games, make sure that if you're in the New York area to come to Undefined on August 3rd. You might have seen an ad on the blog post earlier there. We're looking for designers to show up to that. I'll probably talk about that in some other episode coming up at some point. But anyway, let's go on to another challenge here. Let's see. Make a half-page comic for a composer in Italy. Okay. Okay. Again, I don't know what the country has to necessarily do with this. I am technically Italian, but not exactly because my family's been here for 5 generations already here in New York. So who knows? I've left that now. But half-page comic for a composer in Italy. So I would suspect that it would be very interesting to maybe have the characters in the comic music notes, and maybe there's something really interesting about maybe like there's a meta thing where like the position of the notes in the comic actually plays something. Like maybe they're in a crowd or they're watching another like maybe it's very meta where like these these music notes are talking about music being played or they're being played or whatever. Maybe something like that. Could be interesting. Could be interesting. Or maybe there's like I'm thinking about like maybe there's a secret code in the comic itself that when you I don't know, scan it or take a picture or maybe the AR about it, maybe it plays something then. It's like secret or, Easter egg kind of thing. Because I'm kind of thinking about like how people play music with barcode scanners where they like scan a UPC code and it ends up um, like playing a note and that people have actually like made music by scanning lots of different barcodes. So maybe there's something in there because again, I'm thinking about how you would combine music and comics together. Um, there's definitely something interesting there, and I would be interested to know who might be even doing that. Like, what else is there out there that is combining this idea of a comic with music, because that's exactly what I'm looking for a composer. Could be interesting. Could be interesting. All right, let's do one more. Make a durable backpack for Gmail. What? Okay. Um, whoa. So immediately I'm thinking about like, not maybe necessarily backpack, but I'm thinking about like messenger bag. Like that's easy. That's a gimme when it comes to Gmail effectively. I'm thinking about like, postal services that, and this being like a promotional thing, like, ooh, like, um, you know, send an email instead of sending the email directly to the person, send it to the service, and this service will hand deliver the email to the person. And there's this whole, again, this promotional thing where the bag looks like the Gmail icon. Maybe an older Gmail icon, not these newer ones that are like, I don't know, uninspired, but like the older one that looked like a big envelope. I think that would be really cool as a backpack. And sure, like make it durable. What the hell? I just see this again as a marketing stunt. It's just like people are delivering emails to people physically. Which, I mean, in this day and age where everything's digital and people are just like completely stuck behind computers and devices, I think again there is something interesting about things being physical. So I could absolutely see a ad or an April Fool's or something like that that is effectively this kind of motif. Um, but yeah, I don't know who's not using Gmail though. I mean, I'm sure people aren't using Gmail because people don't like Google in some cases, but I'm already stuck in the ecosystem, so I'm probably not leaving. But that was it. Again, if you want to give this a shot yourself, you can go to wireframe.ds.house/challenge to give it a shot, and maybe you get inspired by something that would be pretty cool. But that's our show. Thank you so much for watching. But before you go, please help out the show by smashing that like and subscribe button just to get notified next time we go live. And feel free to continue the conversation on our official Design Systems Discord by going to discord.ds.house. As an aside, I've been posting a ton of links on the Discord, lots of different stuff that I don't get to on these programs. So there might be something in there that strikes your interest. So absolutely go to the Discord. I'll put it again over here, discord.ds.house. Come on over, say hello, share something that you found. I think it would be really cool. But play nice in those comments, and I'll see you on the internet. Bye.